Good afternoon, everyone. Andy Jacob here with DotCom magazine. And on today's show, we have a very special guest. Ranasinha is the CEO of KEXINO Marketing Agency. And he's done something very interesting with his agency. And we're just delighted to have him on the show today because he's going to talk to us about not only what he does for his clients, but I think people watching in on this interview today will learn something very important about their own business. So, G, thank you for coming on the show. It's an honor to have you on today.
Well, I'm very glad for the invitation, Andy. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Now, you have a very unique methodology at KEXINO. From a high level, can you tell us why you started this marketing agency? Because I found the story very interesting.
It's a pretty good story, yeah. I mean, so it was about 12, 13 years ago. The internet was just sort of getting popular, bandwidth was increasing, and the big brands were starting to use the internet as part of their marketing arsenal, if you like. And because the big brands, the Fortune 500, Fortune 5000 companies, had the wherewithal, had the resources, had the capabilities, had the knowledge to leverage the capabilities of what we now obviously take for granted, they had an advantage over the little guy, the small businesses, the startups and the small businesses. And I felt that there was a real need to offer a modular solution to startups and small businesses from pretty much every industry, to be able to give them the tool sets to be able to compete. Because, obviously from an internet perspective, you're competing with the biggest brands in the world. How? In terms of user experience, in terms of what the customer expectations are today, they are being set by the biggest brands in the world. How you're being taken care of, how that buying process is if you're selling stuff online. That's not being dictated by you. That's being dictated by huge organizations. Now, obviously you can't compete in certain areas, but you can compete in terms of the value articulation, how easy that process is made, offering information, help to the customer to aid them in that buying process. And so an agency like us was founded, as I said, nearly 13 years ago now, to offer those sorts of services to smaller companies who need to compete in that sort of level. They know they need to change the way that they do business because customers are changing the way that they expect to do business. And, I don't need to tell you, Andy, there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation being spread in the industry at the moment about what you should and shouldn't do. So part of our role, we feel, is like a business compass, if you like, to keep that true north, to get away from the fear, uncertainty and doubt, and put into place programs and tangible lead generation programs that actually move the needle. That's primarily what we're about.
That's most awesome. And for the people watching, G at KEXINO, he becomes an actual partner with the companies that he works with because they almost look at his company as an extension of their own business. So G, you mentioned that you have sort of a modular type of an approach, and that's very interesting. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. Well, firstly, unlike most agencies, we don't have a price list, okay? And we don't have an hourly rate, which certainly 12, 13 years ago was like, what? Hey, what? How does that work? And the thing is, we don't have packages, we don't have price list, we don't have hourly rates because, especially within startups and small businesses, there is no cookie cutter type approach that you can adopt. What works for Janet doesn't work for John, right? So it has to be crafted from the ground floor upwards, if you like. So we start from a diagnosis and discovery process, look at the business, what's working, what's not working. We take a 36,000 feet view of holistically of the entire business. We look at that sales acquisition process, how that order process works, what they're doing from a marketing perspective, what they're doing from an after sales perspective, support, a 360-degree view. And then from that, we'll speak to, the teams internally with the company. We'll speak with customers, we'll speak with suppliers, we'll speak with partners. And then from that, we can build a blueprint as to what a tactical marketing plan may look like. What happens too often is that agencies or small businesses, they go straight into tactics. They say, oh, okay, we need to go into social media, or we need to do advertising, or we need to do a new website, or we need to do, whatever is flavor of the month this month. And they don't look at themselves, and they don't say, well, okay, well, how are we articulating our value? How are we promoting this message to particular target audience groups? They don't do that. And you know the reason why they don't do that? Because that stuff's hard, okay? Actually taking an inward look at how you're positioning your business, your product or service, what your customers are looking for, what the onboarding experience looks like, what they see as being value, that stuff's hard. And it's far easier to getting straight into ads and websites and podcasts and video interviews and all of this sort of stuff without actually, taking that navel gazing aspect of your business. So we do that for our clients at a very primal, a very intimate level, really. And then from there we can build a program which is totally modular. And by modular I mean it's built according to a budget which is sustainable for the business. I mean, we have to see a business plan from every client before we'll accept them, which is rare in this industry, because if you're always looking over your shoulder moving forward as to how much your marketing agency is costing you, then clearly your marketing agency is costing you too much. In which case, we need to reformulate what that budget is supposed to look like to something which is more comfortable, more sustainable. And even if that means that the engagement goes on for longer and the results are reevaluated, at least it's at a sustainable budget. So going in and saying, a website's going to cost you X, or a advertising campaign is going to cost Y, it doesn't take into account the particular situation that business is at that particular time. So the easiest thing for an agency to do is to say, okay, well, sorry, we can't get out of bed for this amount. And where does that leave the business owner? Right back at stage one again. So what's better is to say, okay, your budget is this, the business result that you're expecting is this, so this is the plan that we have. Hopefully you'll be able to see the needle move within a specific time frame, and if things are going well, you can apportion more to that budget and the whole thing can scale. But it has to be something realistic and tangible that makes sense for that particular business. So that's why I don't think packages or programs or this sort of thing are very useful, really, because you're basically copying and pasting what worked with somebody else. And as we know, what worked for somebody else doesn't necessarily work for you. It may not even be working for them.
Gee, I have to say, this is very refreshing. KEXINO really has a different way to look at the total environment of what their clients are looking at, and it's really remarkable. If I was to sort of look at KEXINO right now and ask you, G, what your sweet spot is with regard to the type of company that you work with, could we find a particular sweet spot for your offering?
We're based in Europe, Andy. The company's based in France, though we are a distributed working environment agency. We've been remote working since before it was fashionable. Right? We've been doing it for nearly 13 years. So there's 19 of us in 9 countries. 9 of us are in the US. The rest are in Europe, South Africa, and I have a couple of people in Australia as well. And that's purely because of finding the best people available. and the best people available are not necessarily around the corner. Most of our business comes out of North America, even though we're based in Europe. Go figure, right? I'm not complaining, don't get me wrong, it's great. Right. But most of our business comes out of North America. Probably 80 to 90% of our clients are based in North America. And that's West Coast to East Coast, Minneapolis to New Orleans. I mean, it's all over the place. The types of businesses range from SaaS tech startups to retail to healthcare to we have a client who is involved with employment drug testing for employees and offering those sorts of programs. We have a dentist. We have a software company doing transportation logistics software. It's a full range. At the moment, we're working with a very innovative company in New York City doing something very clever with optometry, with contact lenses. So for us, it's great because we get in front of so many different types of organizations, learn a lot about those particular industries, get to speak to wonderful people, clients as well as their customers, as well as their partners. And, I like to think that our clients are more than clients now. They're friends that we do business with. We've got to that point, really.
I love that, G. Let's make a little bit of a 90-degree turn here, because you've been able to put together quite an amazing and extraordinary team. And I'd like to ask you, what do you look for in someone? What's the main thing you're looking for in someone who you're going to hire to join KEXINO? Because you've had such success attracting such top-notch talent. I'm wondering what you look for when you're hiring someone to join the team.
3 things: attitude, attitude, and attitude.
Right, I like it.
Right. We hire for attitude, not for aptitude. Okay. The most important things that we're looking for are not on a CV. That you can't find them on the resume. It's about being customer focused. It's about empathy, Andy. Right? If you're in business, any business, your job is to turn strangers into friends. Right? So to do that, you need to have customer empathy. That needs to be paramount, and that I don't believe that's something that we can be taught. Okay, I can teach you design, I can teach you coding, I can teach you video production, motion graphics, podcasting, all of that stuff. Okay, that can be taught, but those basic human values can't be taught. They have to be innate. One of the people on our team who's an amazing designer, she started off designing yachts. Nothing to do with application development, web services, web design, all of that stuff that she's doing now. She was drawing boats, right? But she's fantastic because she's crossed over to a new discipline, so she doesn't know no. Okay, she doesn't know what's not possible until she tries it, and that's what we're trying to do. It's not about breaking the rules so much. It's about finding what's most applicable for the particular customer application, whatever that may be, and finding innovative ways, hopefully cost-effective ways, to do that generate measurable results, and that's the underlying 3 words, really. If it doesn't generate sales, it's not marketing, it's fluff, it's noise, right? We're here to actually move the needle in terms of revenue. So anything that you do from a marketing perspective needs to have some type of ROI, whether it's short term or long term. And so it has to be that, and especially when you're talking about startups and small businesses. Startups are even more. So hiring is very challenging, especially since we're like I said, we're a remote working agency. We have been from day one, and that independence, that self-discipline, is not something that suits everyone. And you know, we've learned through trial and error that the best people don't make the best employees. Sometimes it's quite tough onboarding the team, especially since it's such a small, closely knit team. I mean, we're always on some type of internet communications channel, you know, whatever makes sense for that particular project. There is a certain amount of discipline, self-discipline involved. You know, otherwise it's all of a sudden it's 3 p.m. and you're still in your PJs, right? So, you know, there are things that you need to be able to do as an individual that reflects well or otherwise as an ambassador for the team.
Wonderful, wonderful. You know, I know, G, that you've worked with a number of startup entrepreneurs throughout your career after building KEXINO. So I'm curious, what do you find to be, from your perspective as sort of the marketing expert, what do you see from all the entrepreneurs you've worked with? What's the one thing that you feel makes a great entrepreneur?
Being able to hear the good stuff as well as the bad.
I like that.
All right. Sometimes it's very difficult to have especially let's call them solopreneurs. You know, the CEO is the instigator of the business. Sometimes trying to give constructive criticism, recommendations, opinions on how to best formulate a messaging and lead generation strategy that maybe doesn't quite gel with how they figured the business was structured up until that point can be hard. So hearing those things, which I think need to be said, because certainly if the tables were turned, I would want to know that, can be tricky. Some people don't take criticism well, especially because it's a very emotional situation, right? Nobody likes hearing their baby is ugly, right?
Right.
So it can be very difficult to hear that criticism, but it is supposed to be constructive. It's based upon experience that not just myself, but you know, the team have had in numerous occasions, and it's stuff that works. So if there is, from a startup mentality, then the concept of pivoting is usually quite well known, but maybe not at this type of level. Trying stuff which they figured wasn't suitable for their product or service, or even looking at a new audience segment which they didn't even figure would make sense. You know, quite often they can be banging their heads against a brick wall trying to sell into a particular customer market because they have personal experience of that market. But the way they're positioning or presenting their product or service doesn't resonate. And what they've done, in fact, is they've created they're looking for a market for the product instead of a product for their market.
That is very, very interesting. I speak to a lot of startup entrepreneurs, a lot of very uber successful people in my line of work, and you just hit on something that's very interesting. Even if you look at well-known billionaires, many of them have this same fabric that they do surround themselves with talented people. They do surround themselves with experts like you, G. And then what I hear many of them tell me is, while they'll have the final say, the smart thing typically to do is to get out of that expert's way and let that expert tell you what to do to get you to where you want to go. That's what you're saying, right?
You don't buy a dog and bark yourself, do you?
That's right. That's right. Let's talk about KEXINO just a little bit further. You have a lot of wonderful things out already for all of your clients. And I know when people hire you, they expect you to be able to measure the results. And you mentioned this earlier in our conversation. So could you just talk to us a little bit about what your ideas are, or what your processes are in order to give predictable, measurable results to your customers? Because I know they need it and they look to you for that type of feedback, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And I think, before we can answer that question, we need to take a step back, and actually define what a measurable result is. Because quite often, especially within the digital marketing realm, which is not by any means what a marketing agency should just be about, but by using digital marketing techniques, by the very fact that they're digital, you can get a ton of information back, metrics and analysis. But quite often, what we're seeing especially when we go through that initial discovery and diagnosis process that I discussed earlier on, people are measuring the wrong stuff. They're measuring the easy stuff. They're measuring ego stuff, right? Ego metrics rather than stuff that actually generates revenue. So, if you were looking at visibility on a search engine, for example, I've lost count of the number of times I've spoken with a business owner and says, "Oh no, we don't need any work on SEO or visibility on search engines in any way, because we're already number one." And I say, "Well, that's fantastic. That's great. What keywords are you tapping in that you're popping up number one?" And they're putting in their company name, right? Now, if you're not ranking number one for your company name, then it's time to go home, really, isn't it? I mean, it's not working, and that's the problem. When you have too much choice, you end up not choosing anything, right? So, firstly, it's identifying what are the measurable metrics that influence strategy. Once we've actually established what success looks like from the metrics perspective, then we can build the right tools and craft the right analysis data points, to be able to measure that somewhat scientifically. What those look like obviously totally depends on the client, the industry, the product or service, location, even language can make a lot of difference. So it's a step back. It's a consultative role at the beginning to actually identify, yes, we can measure all of this stuff, but what's the goal of measuring it? Now, there are plenty of larger companies where the CEO says, well, all I want to do is see a bunch of graphs so that I can whack them in my quarterly report and throw them under the nose of the board, and they'll leave me alone, right? Because it all looks great. There's pie charts and bar charts and trends and all of that stuff, and it looks great. But if it's all hot air, then they're going to get found out at some point in time, right? So the majority of our time is spent in saying, okay, so what criteria are we looking at that we need to measure and compare, and try different tactical approaches that influence, hopefully positively, the outcome of those particular metrics, and then be realistic about what we can expect from an outcome. If you've only got a modest budget, if it's a digital type approach and your particular website doesn't have a lot of visitors, then the window of measurement has to be that much greater to make any sort of statistical significance of the numbers that are coming back, because you just simply haven't got the numbers, right? So we have to be realistic about what anyone can expect and the time frame in which they can expect it. and then from there work forward. But it's also selecting, the right channels, messaging, again, articulation of value, customer segment. It's all that same stuff. And then once we've got a window that makes sense, we take a look at the numbers. We find out what's working. We find out what could be better, and we do more of the former and less of the latter, and rinse and repeat. I mean, it's not rocket science at the end of the day. It's an iterative approach.
Makes a lot of sense. The thing that makes it most interesting is that even though it's not rocket science, like you're saying to you, for the companies that hire you, they need to hire you because you are the rocket scientist that does what they can't do themselves. And that's really the sign of a great company and a great entrepreneur, is bringing in people that have your type of expertise. And after listening to you, G, it's very apparent that you take a very, very predictable approach to your clients' needs, but you have the flexibility to be able to, make custom designed programs for each and every one of your clients. Is that the way that KEXINO basically approaches their work?
Pretty much. You've summarized it pretty well, actually. Yeah. I mean, every client engagement is different because every client is different, and it has to be that way. Some budgets are very modest. Some budgets give us more freedom to do things, to try experiments, to have some creative approaches. Some don't. Sometimes we're on really crazy deadlines because the business owner hasn't actually thought, oh, hang on, no, we need to do some marketing, don't we? And then sort of tacked it on the end. And then we've got impossible deadlines that, we meet again and again and again. Some people look at it from a more strategic approach and take a longer term view. And those are obviously the projects that we like most of all, because we can get more emotionally involved in the business and in the product or service and see it grow. So it's every engagement is totally different.
That makes a lot of sense. And just speaking to you and getting to know you better on this interview, G, I already have a number of people who are coming to mind that I'm going to introduce to you because I think you're exactly what they need for their growing companies. So I'm sure there's going to be some people watching this show that are going to want to reach out to you, G, after hearing your approach, which is very refreshing and different than many other approaches that are out there. And obviously your success shines very kindly upon your approach that you've built at KEXINO. Could you please tell people how they can get a hold of you and how they can start talking to you in a way that makes sense, that they perhaps could get on board to start looking at a different way to look at their marketing in an innovative way, which is what your company does? How do they get a hold of you and how can they reach out to you?
Very easy. As I said, the company name is KEXINO, so that's KEXINO.com. If you can go there, you can get hold of me at g@kexino.com. You can contact hello@kexino.com, which is a group email, which is the fastest way to get hold of us, to be honest. And especially with time differences and public holidays and all the rest of it, email is the preferred route. But there's plenty of information on the website. There's a few hundred articles that go into more depth about what we've discussed today. I'd encourage people to take a look, see what they think, and if they'd like to have a chat, I'll be very welcome the opportunity to discuss their needs.
That's most awesome. Gee, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. Not only are the people that are going to watch the show going to learn a lot from this, but I have to tell you, I learned a lot just from spending some time on this interview with you. So thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it, and congratulations for your success. And stay healthy and be well, my good friend.
Thanks very much for the opportunity, Andy. I really appreciate it. Thank you.